Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. The Middle East stands at a grim crossroads. For over the last 1 year, we have seen that Israel's aggression, not only in Raza but in Lebanon and beyond the region, has caused millions of displacement and, of course, has killed over 44,000 innocent Palestinians and more than 3,500 innocent people in Lebanon. When we talk about calls for ceasefire, of course, we know that a global community, as well as recently concluded, of course, a G20 leader summit also called for ceasefire. But in today's program, we will be talking about what needs to be done by the global community for this humanitarian crisis that is unfolding each day before our eyes. But when we look at the humanitarian efforts, more needs to be done. But Israel's aggression is growing each day. What needs to be done by the regional players as well as the major stakeholders in today's program? We'll be talking about all these different dimensions and what holds for this deeply troubled region. To discuss this and more, we are joined today in the studios by Dr. Malik Hammad, who is a human rights activist and also, of course, he is educationist. Welcome to the program. We're also joined online by Dr. Jamil Khan, who is former ambassador. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by Mr. Syed Basim Raza, who is political analyst. Welcome to the program. Dr. Ahmad, let me start with you. Of course, when we look at this situation that has been brewing in the Middle East for over 1 year now, how do you see the recent escalation, especially that now Israel has, of course, continued its aggression not only in Gaza, but its attacks on Lebanon?
Thank you, Maryam, for inviting me to this very important and vital issue of current global world. Definitely, Israel has, stretched its legs and its, military legs, not only to Gaza, but outside of Gaza and Palestine area, to the neighboring countries such as Lebanon, Iran, Syria. And this is the call for the expansion of the war, which has been calling throughout, its attack in Gaza when it was started. And the global community, which looks for peace settlement here in this region, they started, warning to the global political leaders, those who have their strong role in this region, to go for the ceasefire here in this, war. However, until today, we are unable to see that ceasefire, which is really, hard to say that where that war gonna lead to us, not only about the Palestinian people, not only about the the Arab world, but also across the Arabs and the world.
Right.
So it is really hard that we are still unable to see any ceasefire in this region.
Right. And Dr. Jamil, what's your take on this escalation, especially in the last few days after the killing of course, Hezbollah's spokesman, Mohammed Afif? How do you see, what kind of retaliation are we expecting from Hezbollah, or do you think that the ongoing ceasefire efforts could be bearing any fruit?
Well, ongoing ceasefire effort by the Special Envoy of the United States, Amos, who gives statements that there is a window of opportunity, and he gives a statement that there could be a very close negotiation for the ceasefire. But what are the conditions of ceasefire? As a matter of fact, Security Council Resolution 1701, that's very clear cut, and Lebanese and Hezbollah both are agreeing to it, that okay, let's revert back to that same Security Council resolution under which the United Nations force and the Lebanese force were deployed towards the northern side of Israeli border, and they would man the buffer zone of about 30 kilometers so that there is no incursion, and Israel is not really agreeing to it. Israel says that they want in the embedded feature of the ceasefire that whenever they want, they can move around in Lebanon and hunt for Hezbollah. So that is clear-cut violation of the sovereignty of any country. So I feel that it would be very hard for Lebanese to accept this kind of a condition, and therefore I don't see in the near future any ceasefire. And
Right.
particularly in the backdrop that Israel now seems that the kind of a deterrence which Iran has been diluted. Iran had posed the deterrence to Israel. That seems to be diluted in the eyes of Israel, and Israel wants to finish his job, as Joe Biden during his campaign said that Israel should finish the job as early as possible, and then of course the other things associated with it. So Israel is now less willing to really accept the risk from any proxy, including Hamas and Hezbollah. Hezbollah, they have tried their best, and they have to a greater extent been able to cause a huge damage to to Hamas as well as to Hezbollah. But Hezbollah still has that much of potential. Even Hamas has been firing rockets a couple of days ago, and Hezbollah still have its long-range missiles to
Right.
retaliate. But that is getting weakened, and because of which Israel is getting encouraged. And since there is no higher authority in the nation states, it's only the power which they wield, and the Israelis. They know that they have not only the power, but they have the accumulated power of the United States, where there's a huge deployment in the United States has made an announcement that they would go to any extent to support and to defend Israel. And therefore,
Dr. Jamil,
the
we'll be
things.
talking about, of course, role of US in this crisis as well, with, of course, incumbent government. But at the same time, Mr. Basim, when we look at this situation and, of course, Israel's aggression continuing with each day, and of course, it's of course now attacking other neighboring countries like Yemen, Syria, Lebanon also. How do you see that this ultimately is going to cause fatigue in Israel's forces in any way, or how? And also on the other hand, like Dr. Jamil also alluded to, the role or the inefficiency of United Nations in that scenario, in implementation of Resolution 1701. How do you see and look at this situation?
Okay, so thank you so much for having me, first of all. Now, the war has been escalated, it has been transferred over to other neighboring states. And earlier, it was basically, the idea was to curb down Hamas, then like they used the similar directives in Lebanon. The idea actually here is that there is a rogue state, as Ambassador Saab correctly mentioned, that is driven only by power. It is not, getting restrained by any international organization. United Nations has been saying a lot about it. The General Secretary of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, he has been saying a lot about this. UNRWA was banned by Israel, and the United Nations couldn't do anything about it. And no state was able to persuade Israel to do something about it. So the whole scenario right now actually is about the state which has more power, which obviously is Israel. About the fatiguing of the soldiers and the military perspective here, there is a huge support to Israel, a huge support to Israel. Billions of dollars are being funded to Israel's military by the United States in terms of technology, in terms of equipment, in terms of many other things. So I don't see a very clear end to it, the support. So United States is the only state that has leverage on Israel, but they're not going to do anything about it because of the domestic political situations and the foreign policy elite and all of that. So the reality right now at ground is that there is a rogue state that is inflicting devastation across the region, causing a huge instability, but there is no one who's going to do anything about it. And somewhat United Nations seems complicit in that case, or unable, incapacitated.
Right, right. And Dr. Ahmad, what's your take on this when we look at the role of United Nations Security Council in implementation of the resolution of this unfolding crisis, and especially when United Nations itself has called the actions of Israel in Gaza as a genocide?
There are many regional, forums where we could raise our voices, and there are some forums where our Muslim countries are along. Then there are forums we have, like the regional continental forums. So, like we need to those who are, the Friends of Palestine. There is a group, international group, which is called Friends of Palestine. So these groups, they also need to negotiate with these smaller forums, which could play a strong role as well. If we look at the United Nations role, it is empathetic. I mean, for the last 1 year until now, more than 20,000 casualties, more than, I read today that almost 15,000 are disabled, differently abled persons, have been living now in Gaza. And before that war, 50,000 were, differently able people, physically, differently able people were living in Gaza. So this is not only those who have died due to this war, but it is also those who have been living in this war and going to live in this war, women, children.
Of course, we know about the indirect death toll is much higher, than the direct death toll of this, of course, ongoing aggression of Israel. But coming back to you, Dr. Jamil, when we look at inaction of international community, of course, coming to the situation in Lebanon, do you see United Nations playing a more effective role? Because we know a number of resolutions are present. Do you see they are going to be implemented in coming days with the pressure of international community?
If the history is of any example, then in that case, it doesn't seem that United Nations Security Council resolutions, which was binding on Israel, could be implemented. For example, United Nations Security Council Resolution 2624 and 2625, it very clearly, and it was unanimously passed, and very clearly it asked Israel to declare a ceasefire. It didn't do that because it was invoked under Chapter 6 of the United Nations Charter. But if it was invoked, if they are serious, if the United States is serious, then in that case, they could have invoked Chapter number 7, which means that by force, which means that by deployment of the United Nations force and by seeking the help from other member states. But that would probably doesn't seem to happen in the foreseeable future, because Israel has a support of a veto power, not only one, but 3 veto powers, the United States, the UK, the France. So in that case, the answer to your question is doesn't seem possible, at least in foreseeable future. But as I was mentioning, that in the world, in the global politics and the global geopolitics and global power politics, it's basically the nation states. There's no higher authority. So the nation, they start accumulating more and more authorities, more and more power. And there they end up, either they resolve it through the negotiation, or it results into escalation of war. Now, in the Middle East situation, it is slightly different, because Israel now feels that they have now been able to address the problem of proxies to a greater extent, and the risk they have neutralized for Israel so far as the horizontal assaults are concerned. But now that gives another dangerous dimension to the entire region, the Middle East dynamics, and that is the vertical dimension of the threat to Israel. Now, Iran has huge capacity and capability in terms of its missiles and in terms of its destructive weapons. If that is used directly, then obviously it's going to spark another issue, and then the assets deployed by the United States can be utilized. And in that case, the China comes in, the Russia comes in. So there could be any dimension to this entire whole scenario. It doesn't seem that it is going to be any time resolved. We are talking about the regional organization, such as the OIC, such as other regional organization. If they could be our friends of Palestine, Oh no, we have seen the exodus of people on the roads, in favor of Palestine. But the rulers of those countries who matter, they really not accede to it because Israel has its
Right,
own influence,
but
and
Dr. Jamil,
Israel.
coming back to the ceasefire efforts, every time when there are discussions about a ceasefire or a deal, we know that there is some sticking point from Netanyahu's government. Do you think that this time around, Blue Line is going to be a new flashpoint for increase in violence and for the conflict in the region?
Well, that's right, because if they have this plan of expansionism, and if Donald Trump says that he's linking Palestine progress after the conflict is over, and he says just finish it as early as possible, Israel has full support to finish it, and they should finish it. They have the right to defend. We know what Biden has been saying about it. So both these leaders, they've been supportive of Israel. Trump would be slightly more supportive of Israel because if we see the last previous term of Trump, he had shifted against all the Security Council resolutions, shifted the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and also annexed Golan Heights, which was against the Security Council resolution. This time, now they are intending to annex the West Bank. And the son-in-law of Trump has already announced that Gaza should be bulldozed. It's a very good seafront line. And then there comes another statement from Trump. So what I'm just mentioning here is that your question about the Security Council resolutions being implemented doesn't seem on the horizon that it's going to happen anytime soon. It seems that this could escalate, although Israel has said that we want to give the gift to Trump once he takes over on 21st of January, that we'll have the ceasefire of Lebanon, provided Lebanon is able to agree to the new clause that Israel should have the leverage of operating in Lebanon
Which
and
Lebanon
operating
is not
against
agreeing
Hezbollah.
to. Hmm.
That's
Of
right.
course.
Lebanon is not agreeing to, and that is where the sticking.
Right, but at the same time, Dr. Jamil, when we look at the recent situation, since you alluded to the U.S. Diplomacy in this regard, we know that Joe Biden has now imposed some sanctions in his last days in office on some of the organizations that were funding the Israeli settlers. How do you view this situation? Do you think that Trump is going to reverse these sanctions imposed on the settler violence?
First of all, it will not be implemented, it seems, and the Trump might as well reverse it as well because of the massive support which Trump and its cabinet, nominated cabinet, by the way, they all are very strong supporter of Israel. And I have all those names available with me, and those names, like even their forthcoming Secretary of State. By the way, Blinken had made about 11 trips of, peace mission of negotiation, and it was more of a optics. On one hand, Netanyahu and Joe Biden were talking during Netanyahu's last visit to the United States. They were talking about peace, and on the other hand, the C-130s were loaded with the arms ammunition, which was to be transported to Israel. And Israel so far has been supplied 85,000 tons of, bombs and explosive and equipment and all those, including the devices and including the projectiles, which has the precision for the precision purpose, which has depleted uranium, and depleted uranium has such a devastating effect on the population for several decades in that area. So there are so many devastating offshoot of what is happening around. So Marco Rubio is the next Secretary of State, and if we just read his statement and the support which he's been giving and what he's been saying about Israel, and likewise Petty is a Secretary of Defense, Fox News, hawkish, anchor and now Secretary of Defense and so on. And I can name those 7, 8 people who have been nominated in the cabinet. So with that cabinet in mind and with that cabinet forthcoming and the cabinet which is already here with Joe Biden and the efforts of Blinken, if we keep all these things in our mind, then it seems very tough to believe that it's going to be peace. Yes, the gift could be given to Trump about the Lebanon peace but if Lebanon agrees to it, and which probably would be a very hard thing for Lebanon to agree. It's a
Right,
matter
right.
of their sovereignty, which is
Right, of course, but Basim, when we look at the situation, US is not the only player when we look at this Middle East crisis. How do you look at the recent call by G20 leaders in pressurizing Israel to end its aggression not only on Gaza but in Lebanon as well?
Okay, so the pressure, we have seen it before. We have seen pressure by the Middle Eastern states. We have seen calls for immediate ceasefire, comprehensive ceasefire, and it was something very similar of the sort. The idea itself in G20 raising a voice against such carnage that Israel has been inflicting upon Gaza and Lebanon, it was a positive element. It was indeed a positive element. But is it going to yield something? That's actually the question. The idea actually is that concrete actions, they bring about a state to act in a certain manner that you want it to act. Uh, have you done any diplomatic sanctions? Have you placed any economic sanctions? Have you suspended your diplomatic ties with the state? No, you've not done that. There is a proper procedure of diplomatic coercion in which way you can actually persuade a state to act in a certain manner, but you're not doing that. Calls have been made before. They are a positive element indeed. I'm not, delimiting them or anything of that sort, but there is a need for a proper course of action in this regard, because this conflict, it has gone beyond its limits right now, and it has the great potential to engulf the whole region. So whether it's G20, whether it was the last week Arab Leagues calling for a ceasefire, for immediate comprehensive ceasefire, there needs to be proper action.
Right, of course, there needs to be proper action, but when we look at the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in Gaza and now in Lebanon each day and wider Middle East, Dr. Hammad, how do you look at the situation, especially when we talk it about from the reconstruction efforts that would be required in future once the war is ended? How do you see the long-term efforts are required, especially when we look at the healthcare infrastructure that is now, of course, gone, and of course, UNRWA calling for more aid but Israel pushing for ban on UNRWA?
Yes, it is a big question, and it would be, the big effort required from not only the specialists who work for the emergency situation, who are human rights activists or who are humanitarian activists, but they would need, and they still need money, for the health reconstruction of the hospitals, for providing, medicines. It was around the couple of weeks ago, I read the one article which states that they need $60 million for the health only, like the provision of health facilities in Gaza. And if we look at the education, like what's going to happen with the children who are, away from out of school, who are not getting education. But the thing is, so in that case, if we look at the, like the expansion of the war at one side, where they are spending billions of dollars, for the missile, using on the various citizens' places, civilians' places, not only attacking the Hezbollah or Hamas where they have the military, their weapons or something like that, which Israel basically is permitted to, which claims that they are basically they would continue war until, you know, like Hezbollah and
Right,
Hamas
right.
are
But when we
without weapons.
look at it, look at the situation from the wider lens of humanitarian angle
Yeah.
and humanitarian lens, could famine and this unrest in Gaza and the neighboring regions could cause unrest in the neighboring countries where these people are moving to?
Yes, of course, because, you know, look at the war expansion.
Because there are
The-
reports of looting, because there is no food, there is widespread hunger in Gaza and of course the neighboring territory.
Indeed, I mean, like if you look at the expansion through by military, you know, means, it has come up till Iran, and if you look at in between, you know, the countries, they are under threat, and at the same time, the people who have migrated, I mean, 1.9 million of Gazan people, they have, you know, displaced due to this war, and of course they have been going through the various humanitarian basic crises, like they are you know, lacking food, they are lacking proper shelters, they are lacking you know, like the health treatment, the hospitals are destroyed, and besides hospital, the doctors have been killed and, you know, like injured. So how do you see that humanitarian grounds are being you know, given to the Gazan people? It's not Gazan people, I won't say the Gazan, I would say the human beings, you know, of this earth,
Right.
which we claim, the United Nations claims to safeguard the human beings on this earth from any conflict, from any violence. You know, so this is the big question. On
Right,
the
and
United
with
Nations.
of course restrictions being imposed by Israel. Basim, my question to you is, with restrictions being imposed not only on UNRWA but other aid agencies, and with Israel attacking these human rights workers, UN workers, how do you see, what kind of measures are needed at this point in time to facilitate or provide some kind of assistance to those innocent civilians in these war or conflict zones?
We know that there is a proper full-blown famine going on in Gaza right now. And the international law, it categorically states that there is general prohibition on starvation. You cannot stop the food supply, no matter what they are, no matter where you are actually, even if it's in your own territory or even if it's in outside your territory, there is a general prohibition on any sort of starvation. But Israel has been doing this since day one. The problem, again, actually lies in the fact that there is a rogue state. It's not listening to anyone. Israel, in a very categorical sort of a tone, banned UNRWA. It told the United Nations that we are banning UNRWA as a terrorist organization, and you're not going to do anything about it. And the United Nations actually didn't do anything about it. There were other organizations, humanitarian organizations, which were working in Israel. American doctors, they were injured. There were 6 Britishers killed who were also working on humanitarian line. The idea actually is that when we talk about the whole situation as genocide, the intent is to kill as many people as they want, as it takes to completely eradicate Gaza from human beings, actually. So when such an intent is available, when such an intent is in action, you cannot do anything about it unless or until you coerce that state into submitting to, you know, like the humanitarian law. We have been seeing this since day one.
Right, and Dr. Jamil, when we look at this situation, UNRWA is saying that they don't have any plan B if Israel, of course, poses a complete ban on it. When we look at the European Union, of course, they are very vocal about human rights. How do you see the division in EU regarding this conflict? And do you think in coming days we are going to be witnessing a change in the stance, and that might be impacting the trajectory of this violence and suffering of these innocent people?
Well, to the extent of issuing statements from the EU High Commissioner and from EU other cabinet members, that's right. But under the overall influence of United States. EU basically tries to remain within the ambit of the policy and the foreign policy of the United States, because United States is giving the guarantee of the EU against so many threats, whether it's Russia, whether something else, but that would really take us to some other thing. But never in the history it ever happened. We were talking about the United Nations, we were talking about the implementation of the resolutions. Never in the history it ever happened that the United States, United Nations staff, more than 230, they were killed by Israelis there. And it's recorded fact. Journalists, 184 journalists, as reported just 3-4 days ago also, 184 journalists, killed. Last 23 hours alone, there are 53 Gazans they've been killed. And you have already given the figure of the total. Now the world is just, adding on the scores. 44,000 now, a couple of days from now would be 50,000, and so on and so forth. That is what the state of humanity now. That's what the complacency of the world community is, because they find themselves helpless in the face of the United Nations Security Council veto power countries. United Nations is only as strong as its members in the Security Councils are. And Security Council members are totally in favor of Israel. So therefore, the thing seems to be very gloomy. I don't want to really paint that picture, but since I have in front of me all these facts and figures, if United States was serious, at many stages, I also thought that Joe Biden was serious in bringing peace into the area. But once I found that there was continuity and consistency, and the impetus of the attack was ever increasing by Israel, then it negated whatever statements I've been hearing from Joe Biden and from other people around. And on one side, there were statements. On the other side, Blinken was visiting around 11th and 10th and 9th and 8th visits, peace plan. But it was all the optics, what I could see. If they were so serious, they could have removed their 5 warships around. They could have removed their amphibious ships from there. They could have removed their Marines from defending Israel. They could have let Iran settle its score instead of neutralizing Iran's all missiles. So since Israel knows...
That leads me to my next question, Dr. Jamil. Do you think that Raza has been struck because of the conflicting policies of outgoing and incoming US government?
Well, to me, and I made this statement in multiple channels, to me, there is hardly going to be any difference so far as the Palestinians are concerned and the foreign policy of the United States. And as I was citing you the example, last term, Trump had given so much of favor which no other US administration had ever given to Israel. And that was, as I was citing the example of shipping capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and also annexing Golanite. And as the statement goes during the campaign, that the West Bank, it might be annexed with Israel. That's the next one. Ethnic cleansing. We've been discussing it on your very channel, and that's not only us. We are discussing it. It's the in International Criminal Court. The Prosecutor General has cited this evidence about the ethnic cleansing, cited this evidence of genocide, cited the evidence of the mass killing and the using food for or starvation as a weapon of war. So all these things are there on the record of ICC. It's not only that the PTV World is discussing it or some other world channels are discussing it. It's there on the record of International Criminal Court, which is an organization, international organization. But still, you see, it is being blocked because they could not even form the 3 members, the judges' team to really issue the warrant, because that's been blocked. And the United States have already said that we could even impose sanctions on the members of the ICC. So see the kind of strong support. And once we look at on the other side, the OIC in its charter.
Right, talking about sanctions, Dr. Jamil, there are also discussions ongoing in US Senate now about putting an arms embargo on Israel or cancelling the deals with Israel over this ongoing conflict. How do you see this is going to be going ahead in future?
The cancellation of the ongoing the collaboration and cooperation and supply of arms and ammunition, that would probably take place after some weeks, some months, and Israel definitely would be having a lot of reserve arms and ammunition. If they were so serious, I was mentioning five the warships, if it's removed from this region, and the marines of amphibious ships, well, then half of the job is over. Israel would not really be taking as much advantage of the warships and the support of the US, and things would start ending, coming to its end, but it's not going to happen. And in the near future, I don't see much change in the foreign policy of the United States so far as Palestine is concerned, and therefore the escalation, what we see now. And by the way, we have not touched upon one thing, which at some other stage you might as well like to bring this topic: the Iran's nuclear enrichment, and that is now going to be another flashpoint, which already existed, and Trump had, in very categorical term, had given warning last time, and Israel has been insisting in.
Yeah, of
Israel has
course,
been insisting.
of course, and we
To
have to be
neutralize
looking
it.
towards that in coming days. But Basim, coming back to the escalation of Israel in Lebanon, how do you see this is going to be expanding in coming days, or do you think that the discussions are going to be bearing any fruit? What kind of power does this government holds, especially when we look at US foreign policy?
Okay, so the operation of Lebanon, the Northern Arrow, it was called actually. This operation actually began with the idea of decapitation, that we are going to decapitate Hezbollah, kill the leaders, and then, in a very systematic sort of a manner, bring about peace to Israel. Israel is entirely unable to do something of that sort. When Israel actually reignited its new, form of offense in Lebanon as well as Gaza, it made itself more unsafe. Earlier in 2006, the war between Israel and Lebanon, it was a war of attrition, a war of grinding and all of that, like a very limited sort of a thing. But right now, it is an all-out, a full-scale war. They are entirely, when we look at the number of civilians killed in comparison to the number of fighting people, the militants killed, as Israel calls them, it is absurd. It is literally absurd. And the idea is actually indigestible for everyone here, that Israel can take out one person in Tehran with such precision, but is unable to do so right next door in Gaza and right next door in Lebanon. They have to kill people. Similar narratives have been propagated. The Hezbollah is using human shields. Hezbollah is, playing on the same way, the way the Hamas has been doing, and similar actions have been carried out in Lebanon, as they have been carrying out in Gaza, and this has actually made Israel more unsafe. They are unable to inflict a decisive damage to the military capability of Hezbollah. If we look at the pattern of Hezbollah fighting rockets, it is similar, almost similar. There has not been a massive reduction in the number. So the war states for itself.
Right. And Dr. Hammad, your last take on, of course, moving forward in this deeply troubled region, what future lies ahead, and especially when we look at from the humanitarian angle, what needs to be done, especially by human rights organizations?
I think observing this crisis for last 1 year, I would say that the war gonna end when Israel gonna want, because whatever the letters written to USA or to United Nations, whatever group wrote to them, it did not work out, because Israel wants to continue the war and rather expand the war, and we have seen that instead of ending the war, Israel has expanded the war. So this is like out of question whether the Republicans are in the government in USA or the Democrats are. The only benefit Trump got this time, that the Michigan, which is one of the swing states where the Arabs American reside in, he got that favor that the war was started by the Biden administration, during the Biden administration. So he gonna make some kind of benefit for this region. However, let's see that how the pro-Israeli zealots who have joined the cabinet of Trump gonna see that. But one thing which the other groups such as G20, such as OIC, Arab leagues, they could communicate or negotiate that at least let the humanitarian assistance be provided to these war affected people, the war affected displaced refugees, the war affected injuries which they have received. So at least they should work on that.
That has to be the last word. Dr. Malik Hammad Lang, Dr. Jamil Khan and Dr. Syed Basim Raza, thank you all for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we look at this situation and violence in Gaza, Lebanon and the wider Middle East, world needs to do more. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.